The ocean was merciless, stretching endlessly in every direction as Poon Lim clung to a piece of debris, the salty waves lashing at his face. The ship had vanished beneath the waterline, leaving behind nothing but floating wreckage and the grim realization that he was utterly alone. The torpedo had struck without warning. One moment, the SS Ben Lomond sailed steadily through the South Atlantic, and the next, a deafening explosion rocked the ship. Poon Lim had been below deck, tidying up the officers' quarters, when the violent jolt threw him against the bulkhead. The alarm blared through the corridors, accompanied by the panicked shouts of the crew. In the chaos, he scrambled topside, the acrid smell of burning oil filling his nostrils. The deck was a battlefield of flames and destruction, and his fellow sailors were desperately abandoning ship. Poon Lim hesitated for only a second before leaping into the cold, unforgiving waters, clutching a life jacket and a splintered plank. As the ship sank beneath the waves, the realization hit him: there would be no rescue. The SS Ben Lomond was in the middle of enemy-patrolled waters, and any passing ship would likely be a German U-boat hunting its next victim. The isolation begins. Poon Lim floated in the water for hours, scanning the horizon for any sign of survivors. The sea was eerily calm, save for the occasional cry of a distant gull. Exhaustion weighed heavy on his limbs, but he clung to the life jacket, his only barrier between life and the depths below. Then, as the sun began its descent, he spotted it, a wooden raft bobbing in the distance. With a surge of hope, he paddled toward it, using the plank as a makeshift paddle. By the time he reached the raft, night had fallen, and the stars glittered above like indifferent witnesses to his plight. The raft was basic but sturdy, made of wooden planks lashed together with thick ropes. It had a small canopy for shade and a few supplies: a metal water jug, a tin of biscuits, and a fishing line. Poon Lim hauled himself aboard, shivering from the cold, his mind racing with questions. How long would he be adrift? Could he survive on these meager supplies? Survival instincts take over. The first few days on the raft were a blur of hunger, thirst, and relentless sun. Poon Lim rationed the biscuits carefully, nibbling on small pieces to make them last. The water jug was precious, and he sipped sparingly, even as his throat burned with thirst. But it didn't take long for his supplies to dwindle. By the 5th day, the biscuits were gone, and the water jug was nearly empty. Poon Lim realized he needed to act fast if he wanted to stay alive. The fishing line became his lifeline. He fashioned a crude hook from a piece of wire he found on the raft and used it to catch small fish. It was a laborious process, requiring patience and focus, but it provided him with sustenance. He ate the fish raw, the salty flesh a stark reminder of his desperation. Still, food was only one part of the equation. Water was a far greater concern. The sun beat down mercilessly during the day, and Poon Lim could feel his body weakening from dehydration. Rain would occasionally bless him with fresh water, and he used every available container to collect the precious drops. Nature's fury. The ocean was a capricious companion. Some days, the waters were calm, and Poon Lim could almost lull himself into a sense of false security. But other days, storms would rage, the waves towering like walls of fury, threatening to capsize his fragile raft. During one such storm, Poon Lim lashed himself to the raft with a length of rope, his body battered by the relentless spray. The raft creaked and groaned under the weight of the waves, but it held firm. When the storm finally passed, he found himself soaked, exhausted, but alive, a small victory in the face of overwhelming odds. The psychological battle. Loneliness became Poon Lim's greatest enemy. The days blended into weeks, and the vast emptiness of the ocean weighed heavily on his mind. With no one to talk to, he began speaking aloud to himself, recounting memories of his family and life back home in Hainan. He fashioned a crude calendar on the raft, carving notches into the wooden planks to keep track of the days. It was a small act of defiance, a way to impose order on the chaos. Occasionally, ships would pass in the distance, their silhouettes stark against the horizon. Poon Lim would wave frantically, shouting until his voice was hoarse, but none came to his rescue. He later learned that most ships avoided him, fearing that his raft was a trap set by enemy forces. The turning point. One fateful day, Poon Lim spotted a seagull circling above. He knew the presence of a bird meant land wasn't far. Renewed hope surged through him, and he began scanning the horizon for any sign of shore. But hope was a double-edged sword. The bird eventually flew off, leaving him alone once more. It was a cruel reminder that the ocean was vast and unforgiving. Yet Poon Lim refused to give up. He adapted to his harsh environment, using every resource available to him. He drank seawater sparingly, mixing it with rainwater to dilute the salt content. He caught fish more frequently and even managed to snare a seabird, using its blood as a source of hydration. His determination to survive became his driving force, foreshadowing the final struggle. As the days turned into weeks and then months, Poon Lim's body grew lean and weathered. His skin, burned by the sun and salt, was rough to the touch, and his hands bore the calluses of constant labor. He was alive, but just barely. The ocean had tested every ounce of his strength, willpower, and ingenuity. Little did he know, the end of his journey was drawing near, but not without one final, horrifying challenge. The sharp pain of a fish's spiny fins slicing into his palm barely registered against the backdrop of Poon Lim's mounting desperation. He had come to realize one chilling truth: the ocean didn't just want him to fail, it wanted him to suffer. A relentless environment. The endless horizon seemed intent on breaking him. During the day, the sun scorched his skin, peeling it away in painful, raw patches. The nights were equally unforgiving, bringing biting winds that seeped into his bones. Poon Lim's raft, while sturdy, provided little refuge from the elements. But it wasn't just the weather he had to contend with. The ocean teemed with life, some of it threatening. Sharks, their sleek bodies cutting through the water like shadows, began circling his raft. At first, they seemed indifferent, but as the days passed, their presence grew bolder, their fins cresting ominously close. One night, while trying to sleep, he awoke to the chilling sound of splintering wood. A large shark had rammed the side of the raft, its curiosity perhaps piqued by the scent of fish scraps Poon Lim had used as bait. His heart raced as he grabbed the loose plank he had fashioned into a weapon, ready to defend himself against the apex predator. Turning fear into strategy. The incident forced Poon Lim to rethink his approach. Fear was a powerful motivator, but survival demanded action. Determined not to be a victim, he crafted a makeshift spear using a nail from the raft and tied it to a sturdy stick. When the sharks returned, he was ready. As one of them ventured too close, he jabbed the spear into its nose, a sensitive area for sharks. The creature thrashed violently, but the makeshift weapon held firm. After what felt like an eternity, the sharks retreated, leaving Poon Lim alone, victorious yet shaken. The next morning, he inspected the damage to his raft. The sharks had left teeth marks on the wood, a grim reminder of how close he had come to disaster. A hunter among the hunted. Survival on the open sea demanded not just endurance but ingenuity. Poon Lim began using the shark's interest in his raft to his advantage. He would throw scraps of fish into the water to lure them closer and then spear them with his improvised weapon. It was dangerous, requiring precision and courage, but the rewards were worth it. One particularly large catch provided him with enough meat to last several days. He carved the flesh into strips and dried them in the sun, creating a rudimentary form of jerky. The act of preparing food gave him a sense of control, a rare feeling in his otherwise chaotic existence. The psychological toll. But even as he adapted to the physical challenges, the mental toll of isolation was unrelenting. The silence of the ocean, broken only by the lapping waves, became deafening. Poon Lim found himself talking to the raft as though it were a companion, assigning it a name to make it feel less like a lifeless object and more like a partner in his struggle. He also began imagining conversations with his family. In his mind, he heard his mother's voice, chiding him for not eating enough or staying out in the sun too long. These hallucinations were both a comfort and a torment, blurring the line between reality and delusion. To combat the overwhelming loneliness, Poon Lim forced himself to maintain routines. Each day, he would clean the raft, mend his fishing line, and inspect his supplies. These small acts of discipline kept his mind focused and gave him a sense of purpose. The threat of the unknown. One night, as he lay staring at the stars, Poon Lim noticed a strange glow beneath the water. At first, he thought it might be bioluminescent plankton, a natural phenomenon he had seen before. But then the glow moved, fast and deliberate. A large, shadowy figure emerged from the depths, circling his raft. It was not a shark but something far larger, a whale. The massive creature glided silently beneath him, its presence both awe-inspiring and terrifying. 4 hours, the whale lingered near the raft, its immense body occasionally brushing against the wood. Poon Lim held his breath, praying that the gentle giant wouldn't accidentally tip him into the water. Finally, as dawn broke, the whale disappeared, leaving him both relieved and unnerved. The encounter reminded him of how small and vulnerable he truly was. The ocean, vast and mysterious, held countless dangers, many of which he couldn't see coming. An unforgiving diet. By now, Poon Lim had become adept at catching fish and even birds that landed on the raft. But the lack of variety in his diet took a toll on his body. His gums began to bleed, a clear sign of scurvy. He tried eating the flesh of fish eyes and the organs of seabirds, believing they might contain the vitamins his body so desperately needed. The taste was revolting, but necessity overrode disgust. Each bite was a battle of will, a reminder that survival required sacrifices far beyond what he had ever imagined. Moments of hope and heartbreak. Occasionally, Poon Lim would spot ships on the horizon. His heart would leap as he waved frantically, shouting until his voice cracked. But the ships never came closer. He later learned that many captains avoided small rafts, fearing they might be decoys for enemy submarines. These moments of hope, followed by crushing disappointment, were some of the hardest to endure. Each time a ship disappeared into the distance, Poon Lim felt his resolve weaken. But he refused to give in. If no one comes, he told himself, I will find my own way. Foreshadowing the final push. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, Poon Lim's body grew leaner, his skin weathered by the relentless sun and salt. But his spirit remained unbroken. In one final test of his endurance, Poon Lim spotted a storm brewing on the horizon. The dark clouds churned like a brewing nightmare, and he knew the tempest would be unlike anything he had faced before. Would the raft hold? Would he survive another night in the ocean's fury? The answers lay ahead, as the sea prepared to unleash its final, terrifying challenge. The winds screamed like tortured spirits, ripping at the raft and sending icy spray into Poon Lim's face. He clung to the rope that tied him to his fragile sanctuary, knowing that if the storm didn't tear him apart, the waves crashing around him might. The tempest unleashed. The storm rolled in with a fury that dwarfed anything Poon Lim had faced before. The sky, once a deep shade of blue, turned an ominous gray, and the ocean roared with unrestrained power. Waves surged like walls of water, towering above his raft before crashing down with bone-rattling force. Poon Lim braced himself, every muscle in his body tensed as he worked to keep the raft intact. He had reinforced it as much as he could with salvaged ropes and makeshift knots, but he knew its limits. The rain fell in sheets, drenching him to the bone and blurring his vision. Each wave threatened to capsize him, and he relied on instincts and sheer willpower to stay afloat. A fight for survival. As the storm raged on, Poon Lim's survival instincts kicked into overdrive. He used every tool at his disposal to keep the raft steady. He bailed water out of the raft with a makeshift bucket, his arms aching with the effort. At one point, a particularly violent wave struck, snapping a corner of the raft. Poon Lim scrambled to secure the damaged section, using spare rope and sheer determination to hold it together. The sharks returned, drawn by the commotion. Their fins sliced through the churning water, and Poon Lim fought the urge to panic. He knew that falling into the water would be a death sentence. The turning point. Hours stretched into an eternity, and Poon Lim began to lose track of time. Exhaustion clawed at his consciousness, but he refused to give in. He lashed himself more tightly to the raft, relying on the rhythm of the storm to guide his movements. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the storm began to relent. The wind softened, and the waves, while still rough, became less menacing. Poon Lim unclenched his jaw, the tension in his body giving way to a mix of relief and exhaustion. But the storm had left its mark. His raft was barely holding together, and he was left with even fewer supplies than before. The aftermath. The morning after the storm was eerily quiet. The ocean, so violent just hours earlier, now shimmered under the rising sun. Poon Lim surveyed the damage to his raft, assessing what could be salvaged. He was battered but alive, a testament to his resilience. Still, the ordeal had taken its toll. His hands were raw and blistered, his muscles ached, and his mind teetered on the edge of collapse. The storm had stripped him of his remaining food, and he realized he would need to find sustenance quickly. Using the last of his fishing line, he set traps for fish, hoping the ocean would once again provide. The endurance test. With the storm behind him, Poon Lim faced a new challenge: the sheer monotony of waiting for rescue. Each day was a test of patience and perseverance. He kept himself busy by reinforcing the raft, ensuring it would hold together if another storm struck. His calendar, carved into the wood of the raft, showed that he had been adrift for weeks, though it felt like an eternity. Every passing ship reignited hope, but none stopped. Poon Lim waved until his arms felt like lead, shouting until his voice gave out. Each missed opportunity was a dagger to his resolve, but he refused to let despair consume him. A ray of hope. On one particularly clear day, Poon Lim spotted something unusual on the horizon: a plume of smoke. His heart raced as he realized it was coming from a fishing vessel. With the last of his strength, he fashioned a flag from a piece of cloth and waved it frantically. The minutes stretched unbearably as he watched the ship grow closer. Would they see him, or would this be another cruel twist of fate? To his overwhelming relief, the vessel altered its course, heading directly for him. As the boat approached, Poon Lim collapsed onto his raft, tears streaming down his sunburned face. Rescue at last. The fishermen who pulled him aboard were shocked by the sight of him. Poon Lim was emaciated, his skin leathery from sun exposure and salt water, and his eyes hollow with exhaustion. They gave him water and food, though he could only manage small sips and bites at first. As the vessel made its way to land, Poon Lim recounted his harrowing ordeal. The fishermen listened in stunned silence, marveling at his resilience and ingenuity. Foreshadowing the aftermath. Though Poon Lim had survived the ordeal, his journey was far from over. He would soon learn that his incredible story would capture the attention of the world, but the emotional scars of his time at sea would remain. As the fishing vessel docked, Poon Lim took his first steps on solid ground in months. The feel of earth beneath his feet was surreal, a reminder that he had defied the odds. But as he looked back at the vast expanse of the ocean, he couldn't help but feel a lingering connection to the watery grave that had nearly claimed him. When Poon Lim stepped off the fishing vessel and onto solid ground, the world felt alien beneath his feet. Cheers from the gathered crowd rang out, but in his mind, the roar of the ocean still echoed. He had survived the impossible, but the journey was far from over. The immediate aftermath. The fishermen had brought Poon Lim to a Brazilian port, where he was greeted by a mix of awe and disbelief. Local authorities took him to a hospital, where doctors marveled at his condition. Despite his gaunt appearance and the toll his ordeal had taken, Poon Lim's spirit remained intact. He recounted his story to officials, detailing every challenge he had faced during his 133 days at sea. They listened in stunned silence, scribbling down notes as he described battling sharks, enduring a relentless storm, and surviving on raw fish and rainwater. Global recognition. Word of Poon Lim's survival spread quickly. Newspapers around the world picked up the story, dubbing him the man who refused to die. His incredible endurance and resourcefulness captivated the public, and he became a symbol of human resilience. The British authorities, eager to honor his feat, awarded him the British Empire Medal. His survival was heralded as a testament to courage and determination, and Poon Lim was invited to meet high-ranking officials who wanted to hear his story firsthand. The challenges of fame. While the recognition was gratifying, Poon Lim found it difficult to adjust to his newfound fame. His life had been defined by struggle and hardship, and the attention felt overwhelming at times. Reporters followed him, asking invasive questions about his time at sea. He also grappled with survivor's guilt. Though he had survived, countless others had been lost to the war and the unforgiving ocean. Poon Lim carried the weight of those losses with him, questioning why he had been spared. Lessons learned. Despite these challenges, Poon Lim found solace in sharing his story. He spoke about the importance of resilience and resourcefulness, hoping to inspire others to face their own struggles with courage. He often emphasized the role of ingenuity in his survival. His ability to turn a simple nail into a spear, to craft a fishing line from scraps, and to make drinking water from collected rain proved that even the direst situations could be overcome with creativity and determination. Poon Lim also spoke about the psychological aspect of survival, the battle against loneliness and despair. He encouraged people to find purpose, even in the darkest times, and to never lose hope. A quiet return. After the initial wave of recognition, Poon Lim chose to step back from the public eye. He returned to a quieter life, cherishing the time he had with his family and reflecting on the lessons he had learned. He never lost his connection to the sea, though it remained both a source of awe and a reminder of his ordeal. Poon Lim would often walk along the shoreline, staring out at the vast expanse of water that had both nearly claimed his life and revealed his strength. A legacy of resilience. Poon Lim's story became a source of inspiration for generations. His name was etched into history as a testament to the power of human endurance. Books and documentaries recounted his incredible survival, and his story was studied by survivalists and historians alike. Though Poon Lim himself was humble about his feat, his legacy served as a beacon of hope for anyone facing seemingly insurmountable odds. He proved that even in the face of unimaginable challenges, the human spirit could prevail. Final reflection. In the years following his ordeal, Poon Lim often reflected on his journey. He believed that survival was not just about physical strength but about the will to endure. The ocean had tested him in every possible way, but it had also shown him the depths of his resilience. In one of his rare interviews, Poon Lim summed up his experience with a simple yet profound statement: "I didn't think about how I could die. I thought about how I could live." Those words would go on to inspire countless others, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, the will to survive could light the way forward. Epilogue. A life remembered. Poon Lim lived a long life, his story continuing to inspire those who heard it. He remained a humble figure, quietly proud of his survival but always emphasizing that his story was one of hope and perseverance, not just hardship. The ocean, with all its fury and beauty, had shaped his destiny. And though it had tried to claim him, it had ultimately revealed his indomitable spirit, a legacy that would endure long after the waves washed his footprints from the shore.